Okay, are you going to behave? Are you going to behave,
I'll try
Sam?
my best.
Ajay, and then, okay, say hi, bye. I need to go lay down now. Yeah, okay.
Look at that love.
This time, we ask that you turn off your portable electronic devices or turn them to airplane mode.
Welcome to this edition of the STRATA podcast, where we talk to leaders and people really getting their personal brands out there. Today, I'm excited to introduce to you Ajay Sood, who is the senior director at Commvault, which is a cybersecurity company. And we actually met when I had the pleasure of doing video and we were doing PR for you.
That is correct. It was, I dare to say, almost a decade ago. Like I said, time flies when you're having fun.
So, Ajay, what would you classify as your specialty, your real expertise?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, if you'd asked me, 10, 15 years ago, I would have said to you that my specialty is highly technical in nature, right? Getting hands on keyboard and elbows deep in the, emerging field, I guess, at that time, maybe 20 years ago, of cybersecurity. Back then, it wasn't really a thing that we see it as now, cybersecurity. It was actually just technology. It was just IT. And unfortunately, there was a lot of abuse that was being detected, and there was a lot of strange things going on, and those strange things continue to this day. And so back then, I would have said, cybersecurity. And now, if you'd have caught me maybe, 5 years ago, I would have said leadership, motivation, getting people together. And now today, as I kind of embark on this, Ajay 2.5, right? I kind of think to myself, my specialty now is people. And I've realized throughout the course of this career, as I moved from being a technologist to a leader to, an evangelist in a sense, I find that at the end of everything that I do as a person, as a human being, and if you focus on the person and if you deploy empathy and you figure out what that person that you're dealing with is really looking for and how they're looking to benefit their lives and maybe the lives of the people that are close to them, either personally or professionally, I think that's kind of where this thing has gone for me. And so my specialty, Leanne, is people. And I try to do my best to relate to them, whether they be the people on my teams, whether they be my partners, or whether they be our customers. That's where I tend to put most of my focus these days.
So, you talk a lot about partners and good partnership is a give and take. What do you mean by that exactly?
It's funny you mentioned that. I posted a musing on partnership a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn. Partners are pretty much everything to me, and my definition of partner is not a static one. I mean, obviously, there's the traditional one, your life partner, or the people you choose to spend your time with, whether it be family members or friends. And then there's business partners, the people you go to war with, right? The people you go into battle with, the people who you have a common goal with, and whether that be winning business or helping a client, there's that level of partnership. And so, in order to make that kind of partnership work, the thought that I shared was ask yourself if you're being a good partner first. A lot of times we look at our partners and we say, what can I draw from these folks? What can I get from them? Or why aren't they performing to my standard? Or why aren't they generating the business outcomes, right, that I'm looking for? And the reality is, you have to kind of look in the mirror first when you're starting to have those conversations and ask yourself prior to going out there with your hat open, saying, hey, what am I doing? Am I offering value? Am I leading with value? Am I demonstrating value? Am I giving you as a partner the opportunity to succeed based on what I'm able to offer you? And so these are the kinds of musings and ruminations I've had on partnership from a business perspective. And then if you extend the conversation, you've got a situation now where you regard a customer as a partnership, right? We're entering into a partnership with them. We're entering into a relationship with them where there should be some sort of mutual, give and take. And I'm trying not to sound cliche, but I mean, it really is. It really is a partnership. You can liken it to any kind of other relationship and say, you're going to have rough times, you're going to have difficulty, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have situations where things don't go as planned. And are you resilient enough to kind of traverse those tough waters, right? With the preparation and the investments that you've made in the relationship to that point. And that's where you test the partnership. And
I think it's interesting what you said about partnerships and not being hokey and it's like any other partnership, because we used to equate agency with when we would get a new client or a partner with going through the honeymoon phase And the most dangerous part of a partnership is after the honeymoon phase is over, you have to make sure that you've put enough deposits into that partnership so that when the honeymoon phase is over, that it's still a good relationship. And it's exactly the same as a marriage, a friendship, a client partner, I think. And the video that you did really resonated with me, the one that you had on LinkedIn.
Well, I'm glad to see or hear at least that it reached somebody. Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming at the ocean, right? But I do think it's important to be genuine. And I think your points around partnership are absolutely valid. I view it as building. You have to build some level of foundation or some level of infrastructure so that when you do get to a challenge, you can survive it. And by no means, by the way, do I come here and sit before you and anybody else and say, hey, I've got this thing down, right? I've got it. No, absolutely not. I am absolutely willing to admit that I have failed and I will fail again. I will make the mistakes. I will do the wrong things. But what will keep me and others, hopefully, is the resilience. That word means an awful lot to me. Not only does resilience mean everything to me professionally, here being at Commvault, the cyber resilience company, but also resilience from a personal perspective. And when you start talking about relationships and being able to survive that, if you kind of go into a mode where you feel like you can move fast and go fast on your own, but you can go far with somebody else, if you can find people who are like-minded in that, and you can build that, those relationships, again, business partners, the work that we did together and other things like that. And we realize we have a common goal that we can kind of go a lot further mutually and independently, by the way, with each other's help. If you remain committed to that model and committed to that, I guess, expression of, that commitment in a sense, you'll do okay. You'll do okay. You have to remember those tenets, right? You have to remember those principles that kind of got you there in the first place. And again, it's easy to forget. I've had, business and other relationships go, well and south and whatever the case may be. But the ones that endure are the ones where you remember what brought you together, of course. But also you have to commit to being able to say, listen, we have a way forward together here and we're going to do it together.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting because this is such a different conversation today than we would have been having, I think you said 10 years ago. So you had a fairly established brand back when, you were out speaking on, City and CP24 or CBC on cybersecurity hacks and issues and things like that. How do you evolve your personal brand so that it gets to a place where you are today? Because especially in the world of technology, things change so much. I mean, we have AI now too, and there's all kinds of security concerns, right?
Leanne, I was waiting for AI to come up. I have to be honest with you. That is probably the single, without wanting to sound cliche or without wanting to jump on a bandwagon, artificial intelligence and generative AI is probably the largest single innovation in technology that's going to affect all aspects and all facets of technology, including the field in which I work, right? Cyber resiliency and cybersecurity on both sides, by the way, of the coin. So AI technology is going to be prevalent in codifying defense, but also offense, right? I think the bad guys are using that stuff too. Actually, I know they are. And so to ignore artificial intelligence would be a very perilous decision to make. So you have to embrace it. And I'll also say something, go back to the first thing that you said earlier on about personal branding and longevity in that regard. It's interesting. I've seen an evolution, not only technologically speaking, and the advent of things like cloud, which you mentioned, and IoT, which we talked about last time we met, and now artificial intelligence. But when it comes to personal branding, I've also seen a very, very interesting evolution there, and that's the advent of social networking relative to traditional mechanisms of media. And so what's interesting is you brought up the work that we did. I think of a few of the hackathons we've done, and I think of the PR and the news media and this and that. And now we're in a period where social media is so much bigger and so much more important. And I feel like engaging there with people in the social sphere, the social strata, if I may be punny, Is thank you, is that much more important right
Yeah.
now than it's ever been. And that is also, interestingly enough, from my perspective, and I say this as an opinion, has represented a shift in curated content and prepared content versus more genuine and raw content. And I find that the more genuine content is and the more genuine I become, and that shaky cell phone video that I make has probably gotten me more, I hate to say this, it's attention, but I'll say rather engagement is probably the right word for that, than any prepared, properly lit, uber produced type of content that historically we've done in the past. And I'm not suggesting it didn't and doesn't have its place, but what I am suggesting is in the modern world of the now economy and people wanting to engage with you in the moment, having timely and relevant content and consistent content is way more important than having curated, prepared, rehearsed, and immaculate content.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's what we call being authentic content. So there's no script. It's not really prepared except for the point that you want to make. And you just point and shoot at yourself. And what's great about that, and when I was catching up with you and I saw that you had these videos when you're walking, maybe you're a bit out of breath or whatever, I was like, good for you, because so many clients for us, they don't want to do the selfie video, right? I would love if more people, not just my clients, but anybody would do the walking, talking videos. I don't even do the walking, talking videos because I'm usually out walking the dog, and I have to keep an eye on her. But having said that, I like the natural, and people go for authentic because I'll tell you why. People need to get invested in you. And by doing authentic content like that, you show them the real you. Whereas if you put something that's planned, I mean, I would say authentic is still if you record yourself on Zoom. You don't have to be walking and talking. Some of us maybe aren't that coordinated either, but I think that the younger generations coming up just want to see that you're authentic, you're in a real setting, it's something you've just thought of that you want to share, and you're comfortable enough to share it. And
it makes you relatable. It
very
makes you somewhat relatable.
Yeah.
And but it also makes you vulnerable, by the way. And I mean, if we're being honest here, and of course we are, when I do things like that, I'm usually running literally between meetings, or I've just come out of a situation, or I'm at the airport, or whatever the case may be. And I find that I have two speeds when it comes to that sort of thing. The first one is I either do it immediately and quickly in one take, and the second one is I don't do it at all. In fact, if it ever came to it where I did a quick take, or a quick hot take, I call them, on whatever it is that happens to be going through my mind. And if I don't like it, I'll discard it, and then I don't do it again, or I don't do it anymore. And for those of you who are unfortunate enough to have been following me for a long time, you'll notice that I am hot and cold, right, on a lot of the social media and the videos. Sometimes I'll put something out once or twice in a month, and then I'll disappear for a while, and that's a byproduct of being just extraordinarily busy and on the run, as we all happen to be. But sometimes, once in a while, something strikes me as very, very important and something that's very, very relevant, and I feel that not only people could benefit from it, but if I'm being perfectly real, I benefit. I benefit personally from externalizing something that's important to me. My last thoughts on partnership is because I was visiting with a partner who was talking about how much we could do together, but they just didn't feel, an investment, or they didn't feel that we were connected in a certain way. And that resonated with me, right? Because this is a very significant partner that I thought we were doing really well in. And that's where I had to deploy a little empathy and vulnerability and say, before you ask your partner, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't we doing more together? The question should be, what am I doing here? Am I doing right? Am I doing as much as we can? Or more importantly, have I listened to what they want? The funny thing is, when you ask people what it is they're looking for or what it is they need, they will more often than not tell you. And this is where you have to deploy, one mouth and two ears, right? So you can listen twice as much as you talk. Says there's, talking incessantly. But those are the kinds of ideas that really come to me, and I feel like I have to get them out. And there have been times where I've recorded a hot take, and I've just not posted it. There are times where I'm going to my camera roll looking for something else, and I run across one that I did in a subway somewhere, and I'm like, oh crap, I didn't really do anything with that. And so I'll throw it out there, and then people reply like, holy cow, you're in England? And I'm like, actually, no, I'm not, but I did that one in England while I was running between sessions, things like that. And so genuine content, I think, is way more important now than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I think content which is relatable, to your point, is not super curated. Like I said, the wobbly cell phone video is not something that I'm super proud of, but I think it's something that it's very introspective for me. And I think it's also something that allows me in the moment to give you that quote unquote hot take. And I think that's why it comes off as more genuine. And I have gotten a lot of really good feedback, which, by the way, is humbling. I kid you not. Like my LinkedIn is a disaster. I mean, it's a beautiful disaster, but it's a disaster. I get outreach from people everywhere, all over the world, with questions and thoughts, and I'll tell you something else, Leanne. 99.999, closest thing to 100% as I could say, has been positive. I
Yeah.
don't think I've had any negative interaction, at least none that I could point to, or none that I was able to see. And I find that if people can get a sense of them knowing you because you are genuine, because you are trying to just be authentic, and anybody who knows me will know that as I speak to you here, this is pretty much what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that just comes through. And listen, we do our jobs and we do business, and eventually, we kind of fade away, and all of this becomes moot. And so why wouldn't you want to just be who you are? It just seems impossible to be anybody else, or difficult at least to be anybody else.
I think you're right. Eventually we do fade away, so to speak. But I think it's part of the legacy, though. I mean, you don't know who you're reaching. And even if you reach 3, 4, 5 new people each time you post a video, and they learn something or think about something they hadn't thought of before, that's the point, right? So if
Hang on.
someone's listening to this podcast and they never thought about, just being yourself, natural, authentic, and it's just, what are your thoughts on something occurs to you? For you, it was partnership. What does it take to be a good partner? And it's just that easy. It's just recording the video. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? You don't like it, you don't post it, right? But
Yep.
it's 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 almost leaving something behind for the younger generation. And because nobody has your perspective.
Well, I hope not. That's pretty heavy. I got to hand it to you. I don't often think about content and my career as a legacy for the future. I certainly don't want to, in a sense, because I try to be as self deprecating as I can be when I think of stuff like this. But it gets me thinking about my parents and my father and my people who came before me. And if I see far, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? These are the giants in my life. And it's funny. I keep behind me a couple of books on my bookcase, and so if you recall correctly, we did a few books, together, and some of your staff and I worked, collaborated with the press tour and a few of the things that we did back in the day.
Yeah,
But
of
the
course.
irony is, though I keep those books behind me, they sit on top of a book that my father wrote, and I do that. No one will ever be able to read that right behind me and know that, but I do it because I know, and I view that as a very symbolic gesture, as like I sit again on top of the foundation laid out before me. And so, if I could in any way help somebody, inspire somebody, lead somebody with even a kind word of encouragement. It's funny, Leanne, people don't really need a whole lot of encouragement. And there are so many people out there that don't get any, and it blows my mind every day. I did a pod with an old friend out of New York a while ago, and he just wanted me to chronicle my journey and talk a little bit about the things that I went through and the experiences that I've had. And I did it much like I respect and appreciate you and the friendship that we've kept and curated throughout the years. It's the same thing with David. And we did this pod, and I got a bunch of people reach out to me saying thank you. And I'm like, why? Like, just sharing your journey. People at the beginning don't know that there is an end, or that there's a destination or an ongoing journey. And the start of a journey is the most daunting part of it, because you really have to pick a direction and move forward, right? And so, if I can say to anybody who's listening to this show, and I hope there are a couple, that whatever you're doing, can't possibly be wrong 100% of the time. And therefore, the more things that you do, the more likely that you're going to do something right. And if you can accept your fallibility as a human, which I posted a little while ago, never forget you're fallible. Like, if you can accept it, that was difficult, by the way, for me, right? As part of my, journey or growth or whatever you want to call it. Listen, you're only human. You're going to make mistakes. And I'm not done. I'm not done making my mistakes. And neither are you, and neither is anybody else. So let's just get over ourselves and just say, look, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to consistently make more. And that, when it comes back to content, is you might drop an or an ah, in the video. And I'm hypersensitive to that stuff. I definitely beat myself up whenever I hesitate, or I don't come off as knowledgeable, or at least consistent in my delivery. I take it seriously. But you're gonna and you're gonna ah, or your dog is gonna bark, or that horn is gonna go off in the background, or whatever the case. And it's not gonna be perfect. But to your own point, if one person listens to one fraction of what you've said and says, that makes a difference to me, or I'm going to deploy that, and I'm going to see if that can make a material improvement in my life, then, to your point, that's your legacy. Though it may not be attributed to you, it's a really heavy way of looking at the world, Leanne. I'm not sleeping tonight, no thanks to you.
Think about this. Before the internet, the only way we had to build our reputation was to go to networking events and to be on TV or in the newspaper or in the industry mags, which I still have relationships with people in those places now, which is like, so you actually build strong friendships and reputations with people, but you actually physically have to go around and meet people. Or if you're fortunate enough, you're talking to a room of 500 people. So that's how you build your brand. Now we're our own media machines, and it's a function of catching up to the younger generation who were born with phones in their hands doing selfie videos. So it's kind of like that, like it was before, only online. So people have to get to know you. But the great thing about online digital reputation is the world is at your fingertips. And I was saying to Alan, my business partner, sometimes co-host of the podcast, I said, not posting anything on social media to build your digital reputation is like going to a networking event and standing in the corner all night facing the wall. There's all of these people there for you to meet, say hello to, tell them what you're about. And you're facing the wall if you don't do anything. And the interesting part about that is that we did a lot of training of CEOs globally in the last year and a half. And the biggest, and this is why I appreciate what you're saying about just getting out there. So many of those CEOs said, why would anybody listen to me?
I've been a victim of that very, very, very statement. All I can say in response is there's a lot more people listening than you think. And I say this with all humility. Like, I am absolutely floored by the amount of outreach and support and questions that I've gotten throughout the course of my career. And, back when we did our work, the book tour, the press tour, all of that stuff, I've had people come up to me and tell me, this is going to blow your mind. I was in Italy. I was in Italy in the middle of a restaurant, in the middle of the piazza, in the middle of nowhere, effectively. And I had someone come up to me and say, hey, are you from Canada? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And he's like, yeah, sorry, I don't want to be rude. I just happened to hear you talking and sound like you're Canadian. He goes, and you're Ajay, right? I'm like, yeah, I am. Where are we going here, right? Like, and he's just like, dude, I just want you to know that, you did a talk at a conference in Toronto a year and a half ago, and I want you to know that you really inspired me to pursue a career in cybersecurity, and now I am. And I just saw you, and I thought it was a sign, so I thought I'd come up and shake your hand and say thank you. And I'm like, what? Like, how does that happen, right? And someone you did a talk, and someone saw you talk, and and that's pretty material. I've had people come up to me and say the most incredible things, thank you for what you've done for me and my family. And I'm like, wow, that is some seriously powerful stuff. And never underestimate the ability that each and every one of us has to be able to impact somebody positively. And then by that, by the laws of logic and reason, you also have the ability to impact someone's life negatively. And all you can do is apologize for that and try to improve. But the reality of what you're saying and that is that everybody has a platform now. And historically, not everybody has. And now everybody does. And so you can use that platform. Now, the bad news is that everybody has a platform. And that platform is also eternal. And so, if you and I do a pod here today and we're chatting and, I don't know, I say something, super controversial, I don't like the color pink, and then all the people who like pink start sending me, all sorts of, flaming about, how pink is an awesome color, which pink is an awesome color. I don't know. Right. But it's kind of like,
I was just going to say, if I thought that was true, I'd disconnect you right now.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. No, but I mean, but you get the idea. Right. And so while I don't want people to appear like very saccharine and disconnected from who they are. Like I think when you go online, you certainly do need to put forward a responsible, I think a responsible posture, and I don't have trouble with that. But I remember when I went through media training a number of years ago, the the central message of the media training I received was whatever you do, don't reveal anything personal about yourself. Whatever you do, don't come through as don't let your emotions show. You need to maintain your posture. You need to maintain an interested but not a too interested, kind of outlook. Don't remain still. To have the odd little animated element to yourself. And I went through all that, and I was like, boy, that's an awful lot to think about. Here I am crossing my arms. Don't cross your arms. That was something I was taught not to do.
Well, that's
and
true.
I'm thinking,
yeah,
it is. It's very true, right? But there you go. So I remember the media training. but what's interesting is now when you look at one of the many differences between traditional and current media, social media, is now we're engaged in long form conversation, right? Vis-a-vis a media hit. And I remember being in a car driving with cell phones, bing, bang, bang. Hey, what's going on? Listen, so and so wants to do a quick hit. Can you take a call? And I'm like, dude, I got 35 seconds here. And they're like, that's all we need.
Yeah.
Okay. Bam, conference in. Hey, you're on the phone with, whatever news. And then it's like, what do you think of X, Y, and Z? Well, this and that and the other. And, I think it's important that we make sure this is it. We have to remain vigilant and all that. And I think this is an interesting time to be alive. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. Bye. And you're done. Right. So you're not really going to get very deep right into a conversation like that. And so now with long form, like stuff like this and other pieces, you really have a chance to take any topic and dive really deeply into it and dissect it and nurse it and rehearse it and then have a conversation about it and then welcome opposing viewpoints, right? And these are the kinds of things that you didn't have an opportunity to do in legacy types of interactions. And so now I think this is an exciting period to be alive and to be engaged in media and to be engaged as a business professional in media. And I don't think you need to be afraid to be vulnerable. I think by and large, you do have to be responsible, especially if you have a platform and to say things that are true and say things that may be, true to yourself. And the big one is if you do mess up, own it, but own it, right? Either way, on either sides of the coin and try to do your best. I mean, I think it comes back to the statement I made earlier. We're only human and we're going to make mistakes. And if people aren't going to get that, well, then those aren't really the people you need to influence, right?
Yeah, and I think if you're being authentic, I don't think there's anything to apologize for. Because it's not like we're going out there and advocating something that would be detrimental to people. I mean, we're talking about our perspectives on things because you have to kind of think of yourself as a mirror to the past. So your perspectives, right, of things that had
Yeah.
happened, of which you would have a great perspective on anything, cybersecurity, the inception, the fall downs, and you would have probably a really good lens because of that mirror to the future on things like AI. And so we can only be ourselves and what our knowledge and talk about what our knowledge is based on the past. And that's where I think if we're being our authentic selves, you're not making a prediction of people should be careful to do this because you're trying to be malicious. You're trying to protect people, right? So I'm not sure that, yes, it's a responsibility for sure, but only in the way that we should be careful about what we choose to talk about that affects like too much of our personal lives, of things that maybe, I don't even know about that. If it's relevant to what you like to talk about, things that are your passion, then it's relevant. And
I agree.
you don't share anything you don't want to share.
Very true. And somebody who's spent his career doing being a cybersecurity technologist, frankly, the entire industry is predicated on the inevitability of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't deploy empathy and humility, specifically in this industry, you're cruising for the ultimate bruising, which is interesting to me because I look at incidents, breaches, or whatever you want to call it, the rampant data theft, ransomware, the things that are going on out there, and people are getting got, and it's very, very sad, and it's very, very tragic. And I've seen and been part of a number of these types of incidents as a service provider and as a vendor and as someone who's been turned to offer advice and help. And you see people in very, very dismal situations where their livelihood is on the line and their personal lives are being affected and they're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to get things back to where they need to be, knowing full well they'll never be able to do that. And they've lost, you want to talk about personal brand, they've lost personal brand. They've lost credibility. Hey, you said we were okay and now we're not okay. And what I found through the course of my career, and actually what's interesting, over the last few months, at Commvault, we've been doing these events, right, called Minutes to Meltdown, where we take customers through a simulated breach. And my final thought at the end of it is, team, we've had fun here today. We've had fun simulating a breach. We've had fun going through this exercise. We all play these different roles, right? But the comment that I make is a real breach is no fun. And in the heat of battle with bullets flying over your head and everything like that, it's hard. Going through a breach is very difficult. It's very difficult, and people sometimes are pushed to their limits, and they don't deploy the humor and the empathy and the comedy that we did. And it's very often, and I've seen this, and it usually comes from above, that people fail to deploy empathy, and they're very hard on the people who are doing the work, or hard on the people who've deployed the controls, or hard on the people who deployed the technology that was supposed to protect the enterprise. Whereas as a cybersecurity professional and a technologist, you should know that the adversary is formidable, very formidable. And if they want to get you, they are going to. And so you have to get past that and say, we're up against a lot here. And so, yeah, we stumbled. We're going to do what we can to recover. The people who are working on this are only just that, people. And we have to make sure that they're looked after so that they can continue the fight. Very different perspective, right? As opposed to, you guys stink. I can't believe this happened. How did you let this happen? And Leanne, I've seen that. And so this is the kind of stuff that, we need to kind of, as an industry, my industry, get, shift our perspective a little bit on. And as we continue this, conversation around cybersecurity and cyber vigilance and resilience, we have to remember, coming right back to where we started, at the end of everything we do is a person. And it's the people who are going to make that happen and generate those outcomes.
And people are also the weakest link, aren't they?
You know what? They're the weakest and the strongest.
Yeah.
I've said this before. When breaches happen, people say, oh, our people let us down, or people are not cybersecurity aware and things like that. Well, the reality, Leanne, is you can't expect that. It would be like expecting everybody to be an Olympic level gymnast that you meet. It's just not pragmatic and it's just not practical. And for us to say that we're going to secure an enterprise by deploying training and security awareness training, every October, cybersecurity month, and you're going to do your cybersecurity training, and then you know what you're going to do? You're going to click done on your training, and you're going to forget everything that they trained you on.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. You have to do it every day, all day, just like being an Olympic athlete is a lifestyle. Eating right, training, practicing, doing your mental gymnastics, making sure you're mentally strong. People can't be counted upon to do that. And so when you have a process failure and cybersecurity breaches and cybersecurity events do occur, it's because exactly that. You had a process failure. And to your point, Leanne, people are part of that process, right? People, process, technology. People is one of those pillars. But at the end of the day, if you have to rely on people to do the right thing all the time, whether you're in finance or cybersecurity or in retail or in whatever business you happen to be in, today, right? We couldn't start on time because we had a failure. Right? The internet service provider didn't work out for us, in the time that we need to get together, despite our best intentions. And you're great, right? Leanne, you're a professional. Come on, right? But sometimes processes fail. Am I then to get on this podcast and be Leanne, you're a failure? You didn't do the right things. No, of course not, right? But in my industry, that's precisely what happens, and it's interesting.
Do you talk about that?
I try my best. I really do. Like I said, at a lot of the events that we do, I try to to end with it, and maybe in a different conversation, I have a philosophy that I bring to leadership, and I call it WTF squared. And I have these different tenets that I bring, that W, W, T, T, and F, F. And we talk a lot about the why is one of the W's, right? And deploying that intrinsic why. I call it the internal why. There's your why, and then there's the empathic why. Well, what is the person's why across the table?
Yeah.
And so if you lose sight of that, then you lose that empathy, that empathic part. And again, hey, I'm not suggesting to you or anybody that I got this nailed 100% of the time. We're all subject to emotion. We're all subject to failure. We're all subject to not being our best. And like, hey, you know what? I didn't sleep, or I got some bad news, or it's lunchtime and I'm kind of grumpy right now. Like, these are all things that kind of play into this, right? But do I talk about it? I do as much as I can.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about it here, so that whoever listens to this understands it. If there is a cyber breach or something that goes wrong, you know what? There are people on the other side that are trying their darndest. But despite that, they're going to get you. If they want you, they'll get you. That's just how it works.
I've never thought about that.
You know what? The trainings that we do in this industry are largely technical, right? We start talking about things like, oh, don't click on that link, right? When you get that email from somebody you don't know, don't do that, right? Or if somebody asks you to, right? Like, these are the kinds of things that they teach us.
My mom still does.
Right. And I think those are the fundamentals and the blocking and the tackling. And as I get more mature, there's a scary thought. I try to understand that there's almost like a game within a game here, right? With cybersecurity, and there's layers to things. I use a lot of examples when it comes to finding levels, and there's always levels on top of levels on top of levels to every game, whether that be technology, security, leadership, management, media. There's layers to it. But the greatest example I can give you is, obviously as a career salesperson now, no matter what I do, I call myself that. Usually, in the beginning, what do they always tell you? It's not what you know, right? It's who you know, right? And you think, oh yeah, I'm going to deploy that. It's not what you know, and I'm going to go into that networking room. I'm going to get to know everybody. I'm going to get to know everybody. But then there's a layer above that, right? It's not who you know, it's who knows you. And so I kind of transcended that threshold into becoming, a bit of a figure and a bit of a leadership type of person. And then people, they know you, and you build this personal brand, right? That we so highly of, and it's so critical, and it is critical. It's crucial, right? To be able to build that brand, to be regarded as some form of as an expert, or at least some sort of a good human being that you can be approached and is approachable and is reachable, and who can then be, counted on for reliable advice and reliable direction. Perfect. It's not what you know, it's who you know. No, it's not who you know, it's who you know, it's you. And so there I am, like, I got this figured out. I'm building a personal brand. But then layer three presented itself not that long ago. It's not who knows you, it's who you don't know. And that to me was just like kaboom. So it's not what you know, it's who you know. No, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. No, now it's not who knows you, it's who you don't know. How do you reach people you don't even know exist? And how do you impact their outcomes?
But
And
you
so
are.
that kind of, right. And so, but that's the game within a game within a game, and it keeps going, right? And so that's how you end up playing these infinite games with yourself. And that's how I feel as I try to continue to one up myself and grow, as a person first, as a professional second. You know, these are the types of musings and meanderings that I have. And you never assume that you've gotten there, right? There's always another level. There's always another game within a game that you can kind of codify and build on and refine into your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing and a scary thing when you
Yeah.
talk about who you don't know. It's who you don't know.
Yeah.
And because if we look at just LinkedIn, the 99-1 rule, which is 90% of the people are voyeurs. They'll
Yeah.
look at your stuff, listen to your stuff, watch your stuff, never like it, never comment.
Yep. And never interact with you, right?
Yeah. And then 9% of the people are will interact, make a comment, do a like, do whatever. 1% create. So if we look at the 9%, okay, they interact, and when they interact, you get access to their audience, right? And or LinkedIn might be feeling generous and maybe show your stuff. The algorithm is generous that day.
Mm-hmm.
In the 90% are all those people you don't even know, right? And because they can follow you and you don't have to give them permission. And
Yep.
they may have even seen it from someone else's page. So that's that's where a lot of good things can happen. And that's where a lot of new minds can be reached. And even business could happen, is in that 90%. So it's in the world of cybersecurity, I think it's probably a bit scary for you in what we don't know in that 90%, right?
It is. And one of the things, and this is probably a bad thing on my part, I don't look at the analytics. I don't look at how many people have viewed my profile. I don't look at how many
That's
people
good
like
though.
my stuff.
That's good.
It's a function of a lack of time, if I'm being honest with you. And that's a bad thing on my regard in my side. That said, I I am interested. And sometimes I do look at the likes and the comments and how many of them are second or third degree followers. I find that fascinating. I do find it interesting to see what exactly was the reach, geographically, where are these people coming at me from, which is interesting as well. I do find that actually pretty darn fascinating because I do have I think I have like 5 or 6 thousand followers on LinkedIn. And I look at how many people are first degree engagement with me versus second or third or whatever. And I find that at least, 15 to 20% of my engagement is second degree or higher. And that's an interesting thought that
Yeah.
people forget about again. So not who you know, what you know, or who knows you. These are people who don't know you and you're reaching them. And that's pretty huge. And again, I don't suggest or think that anybody I reach with a post is going to buy a bunch of software from me, which is, what my role is and why I'm here. But I do think that maybe that butterfly effect could help somebody else. And so I think it does come around.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what's interesting is that butterfly effect is in, yes, you sell software, but the
Mhm.
way people buy now is they have to trust you before they buy. So you can
Correct.
be building trust in all of those people that you don't know. I would love to see content from you on what you talked about, which is, don't be hard on the people who are doing the security, because, they're people. And there's so many factors in that.
You're absolutely correct. And it's truly how I feel. In my heart of hearts, it's truly how I feel, but it's also because I'm grizzled and I've seen it and I've had the experience. And I'm super grateful, honestly, Leanne. First of all, I'm grateful to you for reaching out and having a chance to talk to you and to your viewers as well. I'm always stunned at the amount of folks that I get a chance to deal with and have conversations, good conversations with. And throughout the course of my career, I've had vast experiences, meeting a number of people. And I'm very, very grateful for the opportunities that I've had. People have shared their view of the world with me. And, again, if I see far, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. I've had the opportunity to work with the most incredible people, the leaders in this industry. And with that comes that degree of, hopefully, at least for others, a degree of humility. I don't know what I did to be afforded, this opportunity, but I am grateful for it. And I am grateful for the opportunity to go out there and hopefully, I don't want to say give back, but maybe leave, a good impact on some people who can continue, right? As we fade away, right? Eventually. But I do think it's important to understand that being genuine in life, as in content, is important, because it also armors you. Like, though it makes you vulnerable, it also armors you from people coming in with expectations that are that are unrealistic.
Right.
And that comes back to your point about trust. I work in a very complex industry where the outcomes are very high stakes.
Yeah.
Protecting people's data is absolutely crucial. It's an important job. We have very, very important jobs, and they come with a lot of pressure and they come with a lot of responsibility. And so that's why I try to have that conversation about, people are just people and people are fallible and they're under a lot of pressure. And when you get popped, it's not because your people didn't work hard or try hard or buy the right tech or do the right thing. It's because you got popped. It's the old car accident euphemism, right? Nobody, whether you're a good driver, bad driver, winter tires or not, nobody wants to get in an accident. Nobody wants to. Like, I mean, people drive like idiots. I get it. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that. But even as you drive like a moron, I know you don't want an accident. Nobody wants a car accident, but they happen. They happen every day. And so when, having been in a couple of in my life, you get out of the car and you resist any and all temptation to tell that person exactly what you think of them, but rather, hey, are you okay? You all right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I know you didn't want this to happen, neither did I. You have things to do, so do I. How can we get back on the road? But you're fine, right? Like, do we need to call somebody? Like, okay. So, very different perspective than like, hey, I'm gonna, I don't know, whatever people do with road rage, right? But it's like, these are the kinds of things that it's hard to have that conversation in the heat and emotion of a moment. And so
I love it. And I love that analogy too. People who have malintent.
that's the other problem. We assume that people are like us. That's a core tenet. That's human psychology. We assume that everybody likes us or has at least the morals or at least the behaviors or the sense of responsibility. That's completely untrue.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us, not everybody has that sense of right and wrong, right? And people are in much more desperate circumstances. You don't know. And more importantly, you don't need to judge. There's no point. You just have to deal with the outcomes that are in front of us and move forward that way.
Yeah. And that's where resilience keeps playing in my head, what you said earlier.
And it's the resilient that survive. It's the resilient that thrive. If you go into a situation or into a life or into a trajectory, if you're a young person doing school and you think you're not going to get knocked on your butt, you are wrong. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen again and again and again. We'll quote the great and immortal street philosopher Rocky. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. And if the amount of times you get up is the amount of times you got knocked down plus one, you win.
Yeah. So normally, to wrap things up, I would ask you sort of an icebreaker question about having your own talk show. But I really want to ask you, what is the biggest threat right now, generally, for us online?
Assuming that you're not under attack. That is the biggest threat. It's entirely psychological. The second you pull up to your steering wheel in a car, you realize that you're driving a car. The thing weighs 5,000 pounds. You could do a lot of damage. A lot of things could happen to you that are not so good. I would like everybody to take the exact same mental approach the second you do this. The second you pick this thing up,
Yeah.
understand you could be making a life-changing mistake.
Wow.
There it is. I want people to think the same way about modern day compute that they do about driving. The second you get in the driver's seat, you could make a big mistake. You can drink and drive. You can play on your phone. You could do something wrong that's going to change your life in the negative forever. Say you pick this thing up, you could get taken down. You can say something. You can do something. You can give out your banking credentials. Somebody could get your net worth and more online. I need people to think the same way.
It's interesting because the one thing that keeps playing over and over in my brain since you've used the driving analogy is something that my grandfather used to say to me even before I was old enough to drive. He always used to say, defensive driving. Forget about everything else. Defensive driving. It doesn't matter what the other guy is doing. If you're driving defensively, then you're staying away from that guy, right?
And if you really want to take that to the next level, do we let kids drive?
Yeah. True. That's so true.
Well, I'll leave that where it belongs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ajay, thank you so much. This has been great. And I wish you so much success.
I appreciate this, Leanne,
No,
and I appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in 3 dimensions someday.
Yeah, for sure. Very soon, I hope.
You bet.
Take care.